everyone. Sam Shaw here, founder of Wall Street Mastermind. Excited to be back today with another client interview for you guys. Today, I'm excited to have Trenton on with us. I'm excited to be talking to Trenton because I think Trenton is the first student that we've ever worked with from his school, which I'll let him tell you where he goes to school in a second here. But he's the first person from his school, and it's a total non-target, but he's ended up having a very successful outcome. And we always love, doing interviews like this because uh, a lot of students from schools like that sometimes just need to know that, hey, it actually is possible to get
Yeah.
into our school. Like they need to see someone else do it. It's like the 4 minute mile. Like for the longest time, no human being could run a mile under 4 minutes. And then like as soon as the first person did it, then like a bunch of people started running miles under 4 minutes. Right? That's a true story. And so so yeah, like I'm excited to have Trenton on here today to just inspire a lot of you, hopefully, and give you some belief that you can do it. A lot of you probably, quite frankly, go to schools that are even more well known, at least within finance, than his school. So if Trenton can do it, then certainly anyone should be able to. So Trenton, with that said, thank you for taking the time. And if you could start off by just introducing yourself real quick, telling people a little bit about who you are and where you go to school and what your background is, and then I'll have some follow-up questions for you, and we can take it from there.
Yeah, sounds great. So, my name's Trenton Lane. I'm a second year business administration student at San Diego State. I grew up in Palos Verdes, California, which is like a small suburb of Los Angeles. And then I actually moved to Las Vegas when I was around 14 because my stepdad got a, CFO job in medicinal marijuana. But anyways, lived in Vegas for a while, went to high school there, kind of was just going through the motions, didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, wasn't super focused on finance really, just was trying to have fun in my high school days. And then going into college, around senior year, I realized I didn't really put it all together in high school and I didn't really kind of live up to where I should have been. So ended up going to San Diego State. And, you hear things before you go to San Diego State, like, oh, it's a great school. And it is in a sense, but when it comes to finance, not as much. But anyways, transitioning into college, got to campus, got involved in some clubs, I got involved in my fraternity, and going into my end of my freshman year, I knew I was pretty set on investment banking. And for a while, I was just trying to look around for resources online and trying to gather as much information as I can, but I wasn't really finding anything. And one day on a random Google search, I just stumbled upon Sam's program and, really looked into it. I'm someone that really looks deep into things. And, I didn't really find anything that would deter me from it. And, at the end of the day for my school, I mean, I think there was one person that got into investment banking in the last 3 years, so really not much there. So I thought it was really the only way for me to really break in and give myself a level playing field with everybody else. The way I thought about it was kind of like the college admissions program where, I decided that I didn't want any outside help with it, and I thought, I'm going to do it by myself. I'm not going to, waste my parents' money, right? But all my friends that had private counselors and private admissions, people that were helping them, they all got into great schools. And, I had at least as good a grades as them, if not better. So going into it, I was thinking, well, this is the way people do it. This is the way college admissions works, and investment banking is more competitive probably than that. So I thought having private help on that end and being able to tell me exactly what I needed to do would give me an edge. And it ended up working out. I'm really happy to be here. So
That's there's a lot for us to dig into there. But before we do any of that, let me ask you this. Would you say San Diego State is better at finance or better at basketball?
I mean, if you before this year, I might still say finance, honestly. But I guess yeah, this year changed it a little bit. We did really well this year in basketball. It is the first time San Diego State has ever made it past the Sweet 16, I believe. So we
Was
we did
that
pretty good. Yeah, funny. I got to be at the national championship actually, but yeah, I would definitely say basketball. I think we were ranked the top 25 this year. Finance, I'm currently in the process of trying to build it up and make the programs a little bit better, but
yeah.
definitely basketball, I'd have to say.
When you guys had Kawhi Leonard, how far did you guys go? It was like
Sweet 16.
Sweet 16. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we lost to Kemba Walker in the Sweet 16, and they ended up winning the national championship.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we had one season the year before I got here where we were 30-2 and we were ranked like in the top three in the country, and then COVID canceled the season.
Oh, that's rough. Okay.
Yeah,
All right. So actually, you guys have been decent at basketball for a while. I know. I guess Kawhi was a long time ago, but still.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's definitely basketball. We were consistently ranked in the top like 25, but we just never got over the hump. And then this year, honestly, got lucky a few times. Lucky fouls, buzzer beaters, and we ended up in the national championship.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. Okay, so back to banking though. So, obviously there's a lot to unpack here, but before we go into some of the stuff that you just said, what can we tell people what offer you got? Like, where are you going to be going?
Yeah, so my process was honestly pretty quick. I started really heavily recruiting around December, January. I had 3 super days lined up. I had Bank of America, Perella Weinberg Partners, and Houlihan Lokey. And I got the super day for Houlihan, and I got super day for PWP, but I got the offer from Bank of America first, and that's where really I got my only offer, but I got it first, and out of the three, Bank of America was where I wanted to work the most. So I accepted the offer for Bank of America, and then I told the people I knew at both of the other banks, really appreciate all the advice, would love to stay in contact, but I'm gonna kind of end my recruitment here. So I got the offer from Bank of America, and then I took the offer, and I'm set to work at Bank of America for 2024.
That's awesome, man. Huge congrats on that. So you didn't go to the other two super days that you got then?
No, so I can explain the timeline a little bit. So in one week, I had actually a Bank of America Super Day and then Houlihan Lokey. And so I got Bank of America and I got the offer the next day. And then Houlihan was so my Bank of America Super Day was on a Monday, and then Houlihan was on a Wednesday, and then I canceled the Houlihan. And then my PWP one, I did want to go to that Super Day and talk to people and see how I liked it, but basically the timelines didn't line up because I was one of the last people from the first round to get the invite for the Super Day. And then by the time I signed up, there wasn't any interview slots available except for on the Friday, which was the last interview day. And I actually was flying to New York that day. So I tried to move it around where I was saying, hey, can I please interview the Thursday? Because Thursday was another day, but they didn't have any open slots. And so I was already slated to go to New York with my girlfriend, and I wasn't going to cancel the trip with my girlfriend to, go do a go to a super day with PWP. So when I already had the offer from B of A, so I just told them, okay, well, this isn't going to work out. So I'll just, I told them sorry, um, you know, go in a different direction. I still have a great relationship with a few of the analysts there, but
Yeah.
yeah, super excited with B of A, and tech was what I wanted to do. So I'm very excited with the offer.
Hey man, I think that's a smart move. You never want to signal to your girlfriend that this bank is more important than her, right? So
Yeah, she doesn't know yet. She doesn't know it's more important yet. You got to keep her waiting a couple years.
She'll find out soon enough.
Yeah, yeah,
Hopefully,
she'll
she
she'll
never
find out.
watches this interview.
Hopefully not.
So okay. So bottom line though, I mean, you got multiple super days. You pretty much nailed the first one, didn't go the rest. And I gotta imagine at most of these super days, like you were probably like one of the only people from a non-target school there, right? Like you're probably going up
Yeah.
against mostly students from I don't know what kind of people, like what kind of candidates were you seeing at these super days?
I think it kind of depended on the place. B of A, weirdly enough, actually had a ton of BYU kids. I remember when I was networking with them, a ton of BYU, and then I think it was a lot of Berkeley, a lot of BYU, and then also just the regular targets, Michigan, Penn, all those schools. So BYU, I guess now is considered like a semi-target, but other than non-targets, the guy I originally networked with was from University of St. Andrews, which I think is in Canada, and then other than that, it was pretty much all semi-target to target. Houlihan, I believe it was a lot of Berkeley, and then PWP, I think it was all over the place. I think PWP was a lot of USC, UCLA, Berkeley. The guy I originally networked with was University of Washington, which was another non-target, but for the most part, it was all West Coast targets: Berkeley, USC, UCLA, Stanford, and then a mix of East Coast targets as well.
Yeah, and you're mostly interviewing for a Bay Area office.
Yeah, I wanted to go into tech. My goal was to go into tech banking, so networking in the Bay Area was what made sense for me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. If you're interviewing on the West Coast, then you're those are typically the schools that you'll run up against, right? So let's go back to the beginning then, because you joined Wall Street Mastermind in like July after freshman year, before you started sophomore year, right?
Yeah,
Prior to that, like, had you done anything like during freshman year? Had you done anything towards investment banking recruiting prep, or was Wall Street Mastermind kind of like the first real step that you took towards that?
Yeah, so I think the only prep I had done at all, which I wouldn't even consider prep, was take a accounting class. I wouldn't even consider that prep. It's just kind of like the school curriculum. So, going into college, I'd heard a lot about investment banking, and my stepdad was the CFO of a few different companies. So he always was working with bankers, but he never really explained to me what they did exactly. He would just say, yeah, it's a great industry to go into. You learn a lot, whatever, right? So I want to go into it, and I didn't really have it dawn on me that San Diego State was so much of a non-target and it would be such an uphill battle until the end of my freshman year. And I was reading forums online, and I was like just reading about banking and how they only take kids from valedictorian at Princeton or whatever, right? So I knew it was gonna be an uphill battle at that point, and I didn't really know what to do really because from my point of view, I didn't know how to network. I didn't even know what networking meant. Like I didn't know what I was supposed to say on the phone or even email them. So when people are telling me, "Oh, just network and you'll get internships and then you'll line them up," I didn't even know where to start, and I didn't even know how to land internships. I got a summer internship with my stepdad because he was working in Houston. So originally, where I actually found out about Sam's program was in Houston, but I was just reading about it, and I had a lot of off time in Houston. None of my friends were there. I didn't have a car, so I was just sitting in my stepdad's apartment, just on my laptop all day.
Yeah.
Um, and I just stumbled upon the program, and I remember watching the intro videos where he talked about the three statements and accretion, dilution, and DCFs and all that. And I was thinking, I have no idea about any of this, and no one at San Diego State's teaching it either. So I just thought it's what makes sense, and if I don't do this, then I might look back at it and regret not paying that really small incremental amount of money to put my career that much farther. So
Mm,
um, other than I guess coming to this school and making a lot of friends, probably the best decision I've made in college.
wow. Okay. Um, when you say like the intro videos, you're talking about like our free course where we have like a
Yeah,
technical. Okay, gotcha. So you
yeah,
watched like the 2 hour technical workshop or whatever that we did. Uh,
yeah,
and it was just kind of like going over
exactly.
your head, basically.
Yeah, I had that, and then also in my intro call, I had talked to another person that had gone through the program. His name's Christian Holmberg. Shout
Mm,
out to him. He's the one that sold me to. I was talking to him on the phone, and he was going to City. He was from USC. He was doing tech banking, which is what I wanted to do, right? So he was just talking about the program, and I was trying to feel out, I guess, whether this was for real and this was the program I needed to really do it. And
mm,
he was fully on it. He was a smart guy. He was talking about everything the program did for him, and he joined. I think in his process 6 months later than I did, and he still got into City and had all these internships. I'm going, well, he joined later, but he's from USC. So if I join earlier, San Diego State probably evens out, and I probably will give myself a pretty good shot to get in one of these banks. So,
mm,
yeah, just kind of
yeah.
talking to Christian and then having that 2 hour intro video kind of sold me on it.
Yeah, that's very interesting because I think going back to something you said in the beginning when you were introducing yourself, like I think two things that stood out to me. One, you said you only had one person breaking an IB from your school in the last 3 years. So obviously that's like very
Yeah,
little, right? And where did that person end up going? Was it like a
Stiefel.
Steve? Okay. So like
Yeah.
no one from your bank has broken into like a Bulge or elite boutique bank in recent years, basically, right?
Yeah, I don't want to say this for sure because I haven't been at the school for that long. It's only been 2 years, but from what the seniors at the school remember, which has been the last 4 years, and then from when I've been there, which has been 2 years or whatever, like I'm the only person to break into a top 20 investment bank from the
Wow.
school. I don't remember or know of any other person that went directly in. There's San Diego State alumni at Jeffries. There's one at Evercore. There's one at B of A. But in terms of going straight into it from college, I haven't heard of a single one.
Okay. That's pretty wild. And
Yeah.
so so that stood out to me. And then the other thing is, you talked about how the way you thought about it was back in high school and you were applying for college, you chose not to do college admissions or use like a college admissions consultant or a program, but a lot of your friends did, and then they ended up getting into better schools than you. And then so this was kind of almost like deja vu, except this time you decided to make a different decision and go in the opposite direction, probably because of that experience. And I thought that was so interesting because this morning, literally this morning, I had a conversation with a student who really, really wanted to join our program, but um, his parents were basically of the mindset like, and you know, we hear this every now and then from parents, just like, I have to earn everything myself. Like I never had any help
Yeah.
coming up. And so like if you can't get into banking on your own, then like you don't deserve it. Like the
Yeah.
very old school kind of like, you know, pull you up by your bootstrap mentality.
Yeah.
And then so we were just talking about that. And it's like I think what a lot of parents don't realize is that the times have changed so much, right? Because like when we talk about, I was like, so what does your dad do? Like, because it was his dad that was saying this, and he's like, oh, my dad works in tech, um, and I was like, okay, and so he's what, like 30 years older than you? So like 30 years ago when he was looking for a job, like I don't know, did we even have the internet back then? I don't know. Like I
I
think
don't
we
think so.
I don't think we had the internet yet, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like back then you didn't really have a choice. It's like yes, he did everything on his own and figured everything out on his own, but so did everyone else. So did his competition. Everyone else was figuring it out on their own. So like it was still like a level playing field. It wasn't like, oh wow, you did it all on your own, and then like everyone else had a bunch of help, right? And so like,
Yeah.
and then so like I think what a lot of parents don't realize is like, you know, every generation says their generation is the best generation, right? But like things only continue to get harder and more competitive over time. Like how hard it is to get into a good college now is way harder than it was 10 years ago. And that was harder than it was 20 years ago. Right. And then
Yeah.
like how hard it is to get into banking now is also the same thing, harder than it was 10 years ago, which is harder than it was 20 years ago because the internet got invented and then like people have a lot more resources now. And then like things continue to evolve, right? First is internet. And then it's like, oh, then there's interview guides. And then there's like, oh, now there's financial modeling courses. And then now like Wall Street Matchmaking programs like this is kind of like the next iteration of that. But like my point is like better things and better resources keep coming out.
Yep.
And then your competition is getting better too. And everyone's getting more knowledgeable. Everyone's more prepared now. Like I think back to what I did, even back when I was recruiting in 2007, 2008, which is like, you know, 15 years ago. Um, I would get destroyed if I were recruiting today
Come on,
the
Sam.
way that
I
I
think you would have got
recruited
it.
back then, right? Which is funny for me
Yeah.
to say that now because I help kids get in now. But like my point is this, which is like you can really only evaluate yourself against like the people of your generation, or even like we were talking about basketball earlier, like people was like, who's better, Michael Jordan or LeBron James? It's like, well, they played in totally different generations with a totally different set of rules for basketball, right? Like, you know, no hand checking, this and that. And it's like, we can talk in hypotheticals all we want. If they play one on one, who would be better? It's like, well, under what set of rules? But like the point is, and in reality, if we're completely honest, like relative to his peers, I would say Michael was better. But if Michael and LeBron play one on one today, LeBron would probably win because he's bigger, he's faster, he's just like players
Oh,
today are
I'm
just
taking
more,
LeBron.
yeah, they're just more skilled today, right? Because just like everything else, like it's harder today. The competition, the level of competition in NBA is higher today than it was back then. And like same thing for recruiting, same thing for getting in college, same thing for anything in general. So it's just like anyway, I just had that thought because I literally just had that conversation this morning, and then you brought it
Yeah.
up. It's like college admissions. Like, I think about how many students out there like whose parents are like, oh no, if you can't get in college on your own, then like you don't deserve it. And the meanwhile, like all their friends have all this help, and it's just like, okay, so then at the end of the day, like, do you think your friends in high school don't deserve to go to the college that they went to? Like, no, like nobody
Yeah.
cares at the end of the day. They just care like where did you go to school, and then that's it, right? Like,
Yeah. Exactly.
so
Yeah. And yeah. I mean, just it's I think it just gives you that incremental edge just because when it comes to college or this recruiting stuff when they're picking candidates to even interview, not even give the offer. So I mean they're really just pulling sticks. They don't really know you as a person very well. In college admissions it's one essay and your resume. It's a few conversations on the phone with somebody on the team. So I think even having that tiny slightest edge in this process will take you much farther than somebody that doesn't have that advice. And I think people underestimate how much having somebody that can help you privately can mean in a process like this.
yeah, and also um I think like the other way I would think about it, and I would tell everyone to think about it too, is just like, is it worth the risk? Right? Meaning we're not talking about something trivial here. We're talking about something super consequential. It's like, where do you go to college? or it's like stays with you for the rest of your life, or like
Yep.
where do you start your career? Like having Bank of America or Goldman Sachs or whatever, any of these top banks on your resume, like that stays with you for the rest of your life. That impacts like what opportunities you have in the future for the next several decades. And so like who in their right mind is sitting around saying like, oh no, I'm good. I think like like I have enough help already, or like I like my chances good enough already. Like I want to do like just the bare minimum of like whatever it takes, right? Versus like there is no such thing as having too much help or being over prepared when it comes to
Yeah.
something that's going to impact you for such a long time, right? Like you just never know. I mean, even if you're in this program, you never know. Like nothing's guaranteed, right?
Yeah.
But it's just about like how do you increase the probability of getting an outcome that's going to be favorable for you? Like if you can increase the probability from 10 or 15% to 80 or 90%, like why wouldn't you want that? Right. Or like even if
Yeah.
you like, you mentioned earlier, like, if you're a Wharton kid and you're in these finance clubs or whatever, like then you probably don't need a program like this. Right. But the funny thing is like, and you probably met some of these people, like we looked at where most of our students come from, like what schools they go
Yeah.
to. And guess what the number one school is?
Is it Wharton?
Yeah, it's Wharton. Right.
Okay.
And like also like we've had people in Wall Street Mastermind that were like president of the most elite finance clubs at like Wharton or Columbia or Michigan Ross or all these schools. And then like nobody in their club knows that they're in Wall Street Mastermind. But it's like those people who are like leading these clubs, they of all people understand that like, hey, I'm already the president of this club, but I can never have too much help. Like, and by
Yeah.
the way, like usually those people when they join a program, it's a different mentality than someone like you, right? Like coming from SDSU, you're just like, I just want to get in,
Yeah.
right?
No, yeah, just get in anywhere. That was my
But like
goal.
people like that, like when they come in, they're like not just trying to get in. They're like, oh, I'm not worried about getting in, but like I know I have a floor and I have a ceiling, and I want to like raise the floor and the ceiling, right? Like
Yeah.
those people are not happy with just being there. Like, oh, I only want to get Goldman TMT or Evercore or Centerview, and like everything else, or go straight to the buy side. Everything else, like I would be kind of disappointed, right? Like that's like kind of
Yeah,
their
it's a big difference.
mentality, right? But my point is like even then, like everything's on a spectrum in terms of like the type of outcome you can get. So unless you're gonna sit there and say like, oh no, like this outcome is like would be too good of an outcome, I don't want that. Then it's like there's no such thing as like why not elevate your game and do the best you could possibly do and get as close to your ceiling as possible, as opposed to saying like, oh, I just want to do just enough to clear the floor, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's kind of how I would
Yeah.
think about it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny you say that too. It's just kind of a random thing. I've actually had calls with a few people from Wall Street Mastermind, like networking calls, and I didn't tell them I was part of the program. They didn't tell me, but I've seen them on calls or videos actually that you've made where their names are on the Zooms, and I'm watching the training modules, and I look at their names and go, "Oh wow, I just had a call with them like 2 weeks ago." Kind of funny. I don't mention it because I don't really know how I'd go about that, but yeah, it's interesting that how people are all in the program, and maybe they tell you, maybe they don't, but there's a lot of big people in the program.
Yeah, for sure. And we also have people that come in the program, they're like, or they ask us like, oh, well, I don't know anyone that's done the program. How come I don't like if your program's so good, how come I don't know anyone that's done the program? And then like they come in the program and they're like, oh, my best friend is in the program. Like he didn't even tell me he was in the program. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, because like sometimes, people don't go out and broadcast to everyone that they're in Wall Street because why would they? There's no point, right? And also like
Yeah.
I think for some people, to be honest, is like they want fewer people in the program because then it's more of an advantage, right? So,
Yeah, exactly.
but regardless, I think what I'd be interested, and I think what a lot of people would be interested in hearing about is it sounds like you didn't do that much prior to joining Wall Street Mastermind, aside from like just taking an accounting course.
Yeah, not
Um,
at all.
then you came in, so like what have you been doing for the last, because you joined in July, so it's been like, I don't know, you got your offer probably what, 8 months in, maybe?
Yeah, probably around 8 months. I got my offer March 13th.
Yeah, so about 8 months in. So like walk us through those 8 months. Like what was that like? What were you doing? What were you working on during those 8 months? And like what were the things that you felt like just really made the biggest difference for you, I guess?
Yeah, so I guess I'll just start from the beginning and kind of walk you down chronologically until I got the offer. But the first thing I did was just need to get experience on my resume. When I joined, I was doing an internship at Next Renewables, which is just the company my dad works at, and it was basically baseline accounting work, and I wasn't doing anything related to M&A or investment banking at all. So the first thing I did, and something Sam explains in the modules, is get internships at a search fund, and I got one at Redwood Succession, probably a month after I joined, maybe 3 weeks, something like that. And just went through what he told me, emailed a bunch of different people, just emailed as many people as I could, and landed at Redwood Succession. Um, it was industrials focused. The work wasn't too crazy, kind of mundane to be honest, but it was experience on my resume, and I could put on my resume, read sims, analyze companies, all that good stuff, right? And then going into October, so that was around September when I landed Redwood Succession, maybe late August. But either way, it's when I landed that. And then going into October, I was looking at other people that I was competing against. I was looking at other sophomores from other schools. And, just to preface this, you shouldn't be comparing yourself. Everybody's different. But at the time, I thought I was behind. So I took a second internship at another search fund called West Menlo Capital. So
Mm.
from October to December, I was doing two internships at once. I was doing West Menlo Capital and Redwood Succession, which were both search fund internships. And then right around the time I started doing West Menlo Capital, I started a network, and I wanted to network earlier than most people just because I think in these conversations, a lot they know that it's transactional. People you're talking to know you want a job, but I think if you call them early enough to the point where the applications aren't open and they're not receiving like 50 emails a day, it just makes it way more likely they're going to answer. And also, when you're asking them just questions about the firm, and it really makes you seem genuinely interested in what they're doing instead of just, in the back of their mind knowing, okay, this guy obviously just wants an interview, right? So I started networking a lot at the beginning. I feel like I'm a pretty sociable person, but even then it was rough. I made him. This is something I'll say to all the people watching or who will watch. Um, do not network with your alumni network from a small school when you first start, because I thought, oh, well, I'm just going to network with San Diego State alumni at the beginning because they're like my warmest connections. And then I had like 5 calls with San Diego State alumni and completely bombed almost all of them. And then
Mm.
from then, like that, all my strongest connections were gone and were not going to help me. So that was one mistake. But anyways, trial and error got my reps in, as Sam says, and my networking calls got better. So going into the end of 2022 is around December when my Redwood Succession interview finished, and I only had West Menlo Capital going on. And from about December to March was when I really just locked in and knew, okay, like the applications are going to open up. I really need to buckle down and do this. So around that time, first I started doing networking calls almost every day. I think around February was the prime where I sometimes would have 4 networking calls in one day, and it would be like back to back where I was on the phone with one guy and I tell him, okay, sorry, I got a meeting, with nationals from my fraternity. And then I would hang up and call the next guy. And, it was just a grind, right? And then also going into 2023, I got an internship at an actual IB shop, just a boutique shop in LA, and it was remote, but it was kind of a big deal because then when I was going into interviews, I could talk about my resume and say, look, just got an internship at a boutique investment banking shop and, doing some cross-border M&A work, right? So that's kind of a big deal in interviews as well. And then again, from that December line on was when I just really did a lot of interview prep. I started doing behaviorals. I wrote out my whole questionnaire, which was like 20 pages, and sent it to Sam. I also had an analyst at PWP actually that reviewed it, and he told me how to answer it as well. So that was another kind of review point I had. But did all the behavioral stuff, and then the last thing I did was prepare for technicals. I think from about January on, I did technical prep for about 1 to 2 hours a day, and just was trying to read over everything. I had a bunch of different resources also because just a funny story, I guess. The reason I got the internship at Takanaka Partners, which is the internship I actually just recently concluded, it was because I hit up a guy at UCLA that I had no idea about, right? And I texted him, hey, you're working at this investment banking firm, and I don't know how to get an interview. And so we got on the phone, and he's in my grade, and he actually got an offer to JP Morgan, but he helped me out and he gave me the contact of the person that runs recruiting, and I got it, right? But also when I reached out to him, sent me a ton of stuff on recruiting as well, and I just combined everything. And going into interview season, I had my first round interviews around mid-February. My first interview ever actually was Lazard LA, but I completely bombed it because there's a bunch of technical concepts I actually didn't really know about.
Mm.
So actually there was a one point where I think I bombed one so bad that the actual interviewers were laughing. It was that bad actually, because they asked me about the question and I had no idea how to answer it. And obviously, as you can see in the back of my room, I did not want to interview here because it's completely dark. So I was at my friend's house and they said, all right, can you pull out a piece of pen and paper? And I didn't even have it next to me. There was no pen or paper. And I was looking around my room trying to find it. And it wasn't there because at my friend's house. So they were just laughing. I didn't even have the materials ready for a question I didn't know. So that was the first one. And then from then on, I thought, okay, well, that's the level I need to be at. So I studied even harder.
Wait, what
Kept
date?
networking.
What just interrupt there? What around what date was that interview? You saying that was January?
No, no. So I my first interview was mid-February. So
Mid February. Okay.
I had the JP Morgan Stanley hire views in January, but that doesn't really count. My first real in-person interview was Lazard LA in mid-February. And then I had technical screen for B of A, which was actually out of the blue because the analyst I knew said, hey, let's have another call. And then he just grilled me on technicals for like 35 minutes. And I guess I passed. I only messed up on one question. And then from then on, I had a first round of PWP in early March. I had a first round of Houlihan low key early March. Did the hire view for B of A early March. And then my B of A Super Day was the 13th of March, which I got the offer for. And then Houlihan was the 15th. And then I think PWP would have been around the 25th, something like that. But at that point, I was already done. So I would say, the meat of my process was between December and March. I honestly would tell people going through this to start earlier. I did the interview prep a little bit late, I think. But in general, that was how it went for me. It kind of went from, getting relevant experience, starting network, and then doing interview prep. And then, yeah, kind of all worked out in the end. And just kind of got lucky.
How well, I wouldn't say you got lucky, but how
Well,
much because it sounds like you put in a lot of work, but how much so that Lazar interview was mid-Feb,
yeah,
and that technical screen out of the blue from B of A, when was that?
that was probably like February 25th, 29th, like 10 to 14 days in between those.
Okay. So within those 10 to 14 days, you just went from not being ready for technical interviews at all to only missing one question in an entire 35-minute interview? Like you just like went from 0 to 100 just in those 2 weeks?
Yeah, so I'll say this, my behavioral interview prep started way earlier than my technical. I really only started technical interview prep maybe mid-January. And, I was going through the basic concepts and I thought I had it down. I knew all the stuff I need to know. And then I got into the Lazard interview, and the difference between, again, just reading off the guides online versus having somebody that's a private tutor like Sam, right, is that he can tell you how to answer the questions a step further. So in my Lazard interview, they asked me questions, right? And I knew the answers because it was the typical ones. And then they would ask you conceptually, okay, now answer this. And it would be the follow up. And it wouldn't be the main questions that got me, it would be the follow ups to the main questions. And those really test not only that you've just memorized the answers, but also that you actually understand the concept. So from that point on, in between, mid-February to the end of February, I was really trying to understand everything conceptually and not just I know the answer from reading off, books and pages and stuff. So when I got to the B of A one, I got all the questions right except for one question, and it was the most difficult question he asked me. And yeah, I didn't know that one. I tried to walk him through my thinking, and it was like a quarter correct. But at that point, he said it was okay, and we'd be in contact or whatever. And then I think a week later, he sent me an email saying, I'm going to send you the hire view, and then you'll have a super day shortly after. So the hire view didn't even matter for me. He already told me I had the super day.
Like a
So
formality, basically.
yeah, it was a formality. So
Yeah.
I'd say, again, back to the original question, I really just tried to buckle down and understand all the concepts conceptually and be able to know what they mean in the actual business world sense, and not just, okay, I can write it down on paper and do the calculation.
So let's double click on that a little bit, because I think that's honestly the biggest mistake that we see students make all the time when it comes to learning technicals, right? Because I think what the vast majority of the people are doing out there still, it's a very outdated strategy, I would say, but like they take the 400 questions guide, or they take whatever, pick your most popular guide. Okay, I don't know,
Yeah,
Wall Street Oasis, or like Breaking into Wall Street, or whatever. And then they just like read it front to back, and then they just like memorize the answers to all 400 questions or whatever, right? Like
yeah,
that's what most people are doing. And I would honestly say like a lot of these guys first came out back in my days. As I recruited like 15 years ago, a lot of these guys came out back then, and then like maybe they come out with like, you know, versions 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I don't know. Wall Street always guys on like version 7 or 8 now or whatever, right?
Yeah,
Each version will change like very slightly, but they're virtually like the same guide still. Um, Back in my days, if you read one of these guides, you were like way ahead of the curve because like other people weren't doing
interesting.
this. Yeah, it is crazy, right? Because that's what I'm saying. Is like that's what I mean earlier. So, that's what I was saying is like the competition keeps getting harder, right? That's what I
Yeah,
said. Like if I did what I did back then, today I would get destroyed, right? But nowadays, everyone's reading these guides. Your interviewers have read these guides because that's what they read when they were coming
yeah,
in. And then everyone's also memorizing it and just regurgitating these answers. And the reason why your Lazar interviewers and plus any other interviewers for that matter, the reason why they're asking you these follow-up questions that are more conceptual as opposed to just like stuff you can memorize from the guides is because they already know that everyone is already memorizing the answers to those guys. So like if all they're doing is just asking you these definitional questions that they know you've already memorized, they're like, oh, like, you know, how does $10 of depreciation affect, you know, flows to the three statements? Like everybody has
yeah,
that memorized, right? And so like it doesn't really help them figure out who's actually good and who's not, right? And so, but on this point of actually learning everything conceptually, like how do you actually do that though? Like if you're not just memorizing answers, how do you actually do that? Because I think that's what like a lot of students are missing, right? Was there like a change in approach that you had to make, or I don't know, like just how did you go about it?
yeah. I mean, I think it's just when you're memorizing a question, it's not only understanding like the actual answer to the question, but it's also understanding how did you get to that? Like what factors actually created that answer? And then also in a business sense, what does that actually mean? Because even, you know, in a situation where you don't know a question, but you understand it conceptually, like maybe you don't know the exact answer, but you understand what the concept is. There was a few times in interviews where maybe I didn't know the exact answer, but because I could show the interviewers that I understood in a business sense what was going on, they still gave me a pass for it. And even you mentioned $10 of depreciation. It's funny you mentioned that because one of the times I messed up in was our interview was they asked that, and I obviously got the right answer for that one. But then it was a follow up, and they, you know, there was +4 in cash at the top of the balance sheet, and they said, okay, so why is there +4? And I couldn't answer. I was just trying to come up with something on the spot, and I didn't know. And then you have to understand in the question, well, the +4 is from the tax shield, and you know, the $4 is from the $4 you save on the income statement, right? So that's like a very baseline level one, right? But also, you know, I got questions in my B of A interview where they drilled really deep down into a DCF and they, you know, talked about beta and they talked about, you know, levering it, unlevering it, and like the business sense of it and like what it actually means. And I don't think I got it exactly right. But in a way, I was able to explain to them the business sense of, okay, this is why they're doing the beta, and this is why they're unlevering it, and this is why they're doing, you know, they're doing all these mechanics to the numbers to make it work, right? And so I didn't get the numbers exactly right, but because I was able to explain why they were actually doing it, they, you know, you have to understand from the bankers' perspectives that technicals they can teach you. They can teach you how to calculate numbers in probably 30 minutes. I mean, it's not going to take long, right? So if they like you as a candidate and you show that you're interested in business and you understand why they're doing it, even if the calculations are slightly off, if you're confident in what you're saying about business, then if they like you, it's not really going to be a make or break because you actually understand and are interested in what they're talking about. So I would say that was the biggest difference is, you know, not just memorizing the formulas and saying, okay, these are the numbers, but also being able to explain to the interviewer that you actually know what's going on in a business sense. And in a business environment, you would be able to tell somebody you're talking to why this is happening and this is happening and this is the outcome.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And this is why I always tell people like the behavioral interview is actually even more important than the technical interview. Like technical interview, it's like check the box. Like you got to have
Yeah.
some like bare minimum level of technical skills. Like you can't just like not know anything,
Yeah.
right? But you gotta have like a, you know, basic level of understanding there, and then the rest of it, like the more important thing is like, do they like you or not? Can you get them to like you as a
Yeah.
human being, right? And so if they don't like you and you nail every single technical question, they're still not going to hire you, right?
Oh, yeah.
But if they like you and you miss a question here and miss a question there, like it's not the end of the world, right? And we see that all
Yeah.
the time. Like we see that play out so many times with our students who get offers. Is like it's not because they always are perfect on every single technical question, but it's like their behavioral answers are so good and their stories are so polished and it makes them stand out that that's what pushes them over the edge, right?
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I guess like the one of the last things I'll ask you about the program too is like it sounds like because we were talking about this before, right? Like at SDSU, like you tell your friends you're going to investment banking, they don't even know what investment banking really is, or they ask you like, "Oh, what stocks are you going to invest in?"
Yeah,
Which is like how non-investment bankers think about investment banking, right? Like they hear investment
yeah,
banking, they think like they think it's like private wealth management, basically, right?
exactly. Yeah.
And so like you're coming from an environment like that, like what what do you how do you feel about like the I guess like the community inside of Wall Street Mastermind? Like was that I mean, if you just had to describe it and like did that do anything for you? And especially coming from a non-target school, like how did that kind of impact your recruiting process, I guess?
Yeah. So before I go into the Wall Street Mastermind community, I can just give a little bit of a background of SDSU's like IB community as well. So I'm in the biggest finance club on campus, even though it probably would be nothing compared to clubs at other schools, but I'm in the biggest one. I'm on the exec board, right? And even within that club, which is supposed to be the finance club, most of the people are trying to do commercial real estate or wealth management. So there's really not even much there. I think there's two other kids in my grade that want to do investment banking, which we'll see if they get offers. They don't have any yet, but we'll see what happens. And then there's about two a year younger than me that try to do it, but really there's not much there. And you know, I love all the guys I hang out with all the time, but I explain to them about investment banking, or I'll talk about private equity or venture capital, whatever, and it all flies over their head. They have no idea. They just want to know when the next party is. So they just it doesn't really work. So going into Wall Street Mastermind, I think the most important thing is just that it gives you a sense of sanity, and it gives you a sense of like what's what's even going on and how people are going through the same struggles as you. Because I think if you're from San Diego State and you're doing it by yourself, there's nobody that you can even talk to the process about. It makes you seem like you're on an island and you're kind of by yourself going through the process. And, I think, I guess that's okay for some people, but for me, I'm a very social person. I like to be in a group of people, and, being able to have those people in the program to fall back on, that whether it was you want to ask a question or people are just explaining the struggles they were going through and it's just relatable to what you're doing, or if you have a really pressing issue and you need to get it answered, and obviously there's nobody older than you at the school that can answer them for you, right? You can text Sam or the other guys in the program that help assist Sam, and they're going to answer it for you within a few hours, right? So no matter what it was, the community made up for the fact that I didn't have it at San Diego State. And I'm in plenty of communities at San Diego State, but I'm in the finance community, but the finance community at San Diego State is just not there for investment banking or really anything else that's the highest paying jobs out of college. So I think Wall Street Mastermind just provided me a community I didn't have, and again, like just made it relatable, and made me find people also that are going through the same thing. Because I think
Yeah.
when you're going through something with, you're going through the same thing with people your age and you're all relating to each other, it makes it easier, and I think just makes it more palatable, I guess,
Yeah.
because you know that other people are going through the same struggles you are, and you're not alone in this. You're not
Yeah.
alone. So that was a big deal for me.
I mean, and that's huge, right? Like that cannot be understated because investment banking recruiting is so tough
Yeah.
and it's such a grind. And you have to, excuse the French, eat a lot of shit along the way.
Oh, for sure.
Right. And so, like, if you're doing that by yourself and no one around you understands what you're going through,
Yeah.
it's like a very lonely process. But, like, if you have a group of friends, even if they don't go to your school, but you can talk to them online every day, whatever, and you guys going through it together, it's almost like, I mean, you're in a fraternity. It's like pledging with your pledge brothers. Like, you either
Exactly.
pledge by yourself and take a
Oh, it'd
bunch
be
of
brutal.
shit. Yeah. But if you could pledge with just another group of people, even if you're suffering, like, the fact that
Yeah.
you're suffering together, it actually forges a bond between you and that group of people. And then at the end of it, when you come out the other side, like you cross into the fraternity, or in this case, you get the job, you guys all get the job. Like that's like we all
Yeah.
made it together, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And I think in this process too, it's not just like people think it's, oh, I have to eat shit from networking and doing all this interview prep. The eating shit starts way before that. To even get in position, you have to get these search fund internships, which suck. You don't do anything except for generate companies, and you have to eat shit for months to get this on your resume. And
yeah,
then that part's only like the first part, and then you have to get on these networking calls, and sometimes the person's typing in the back, Or, I had this one call where a guy from Goldman basically told me that my why banking answer was terrible, and I'm never going to work in the industry, right? So it keeps going, it keeps going, and then it just the eating shit part starts way earlier. This is what I'm trying to say than than people think.
Dude, did you send him an update email? No, you got an offer? It's like,
No, maybe I
yeah.
should. And you know what's funny? It was one of the San Diego State alumni at the beginning.
Oh, it was one of the calls that you bombed.
Yeah. Oh, I bombed it big time. I mean, I hadn't gone through the behavioral module, and I hadn't written out a story like tell me about yourself or why invest in banking. So I was just going completely off the dome, making stuff
Oh,
up on the spot, and obviously it was terrible.
man, you should send him an email in a very polite and grateful way. Just like, hey man, thanks for ripping into me on that call. You really, lit a fire into my ass. And I just want you to know that I ended up getting an offer here and I wouldn't have done it without you.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's he was worked at Goldman down in Houston, I think. I mean, yeah, I definitely could do that. I might do that after this call.
That's awesome. I guess I was even talking for a long time. Last question for you. Really is more for our audience, but like, do you have any advice or even just like one piece of advice that you want to share with people who are maybe still going through the process now or about to go through the process um that you just went through? Maybe they come from a similar background, maybe they go to a total non-target school, they're one of the only guys there that are trying to break into banking. Like, was there something that just really helped you along the way, get to where you are today, like really made a difference for you, like anything like that that you want to pass on to other people?
Yeah, I would say kind of two things, and then one's going to be more specific, than one's going to be more high level. So I'd say on the more specific side, um, it's going to sound weird, but in a recruiting sense, in a networking sense, I learned this from my fraternity and going through Rush with that. Try to be relatable and be cool, but don't just be a try hard. And I think for me at least, like my networking calls and networking efforts went a lot better than a lot of people I knew, just because I wasn't trying to act like a super finance hardo on the call. You have to understand when you're having these networking calls with bankers, they talk about finance and they talk about whatever they're doing on the job all the time. That's what they do 24/7 every day, right? But if you're the
Yeah.
guy that gets on the call and still asks them about the job, but also is just making conversation and maybe talking about sports or something they like to do. Maybe like I had a call one time about a guy like to go hiking, right? And we talked about hiking for 10 minutes. And even though it may seem pretty stupid at the time to just talk about something that's not finance related, I think it's counterintuitive because they're going to remember you much more than the people that just talked about a DCF or what's going on in the markets the entire call. And I think at the end of the day, they know that if you make it past the first round interview or whatever, or if you make it into the first round, you're going to get grilled on technicals and you're going to have to know your stuff to make it on to the next round or get the offer, right? So you have to think about it from their sense of they're just trying to get to know you and get to know if you're a likable guy. And I think if you ask them questions about their personal life and get to know them and really get to know their interests and what they like to do, and then also just obviously talk about the job as well, I think those networking calls took me a lot farther, and outcomes were just a lot better from those networking calls and just at the banks in general. So I would try to remember that going into it. And then the second thing is just don't give up. um, I think a lot of times, especially in a situation like me where you're at a place where nobody else is doing it and nobody has done it really, at least from what I know, it's going to make it seem like it's impossible and you can't do it. And I remember going through the technical questions that when I first joined, and there was all these kids that have been in the program longer than me asking these pretty difficult questions that I had no idea about. And as time went on, I thought I was falling behind, and you just can't let that get to you. You have to keep going. You have to understand that everybody's on their own journey. There's people that join the program really quickly and get an offer like that, and there's people that join late or excuse me, join early and it takes them a long time. But I think no matter what, you just can't give up. I mean, the process goes on a lot longer than you think. I know you're going to see people on LinkedIn posting offers from JP Morgan a month after the application opens up in early February, right? And you're thinking, man, all the offers going out already. I don't know what to do. I'm not prepared. I haven't done enough. But so I just have to understand that if you work hard enough and you're following what Sam says and you're doing everything he's telling you, that most likely it's going to end up working out. And it all kind of came together for me at one time before I got to that late February, early March period. I still was very unsure about if I could do it. But I just said, well, I'm this far, paid this money to be part of the program. I bet on myself. Like, I'm not going to let myself give up, and I'm not going to let myself not get the outcome I want. And it sounds weird, but maybe it's a little bit like gambling, where gambling, they say the time you win is the time you don't do it, right? Your next big win, let's say you're gambling $1,000, is the one right before you give up, right before you walk away from the whatever gambling you're doing. And I'm not advocating for gambling, but what I'm saying is that in this banking recruiting timeline as a whole, if you give up, you may be right on the cusp of breaking through, and you might give up right before you're on that breaking point where you finally get over the hump, right? And for me, that was around late February, early March, where I got the first rounds, and then I got past them for the first time, and I got to the super days. And I think you know just you can't give up. And the feeling of actually doing it, I mean, my process in Wall Street Mastermind, I'd say honestly, is even shorter than some other people. I've been in the program for 8 months, which seems like a long time, but in reality, for people in the program, it's really not that much of a long time. There's people that do it for at least a couple years, right? So I say just don't give up. I promise you, if you keep working hard and you don't compare yourself to others and you stay on your own path, it'll most likely work out in the end, and you'll end up with somewhere that you really want to go.
So much goodness and wisdom in what you just said. In terms of not comparing yourself to others, everyone being on their own journey, and even the thing you said about like, seeing people post on LinkedIn that they got a job here
Yeah,
and they got a job there, like, those are all like the very normal emotions that everyone goes through. And it's an emotional roller coaster, right? Like even the students out in Wall Street Management, like, I see questions from all of our students every day. And so like, now I'm starting to get questions like, oh, like I'm hearing from people that, it's too late now to get offers, and like all the elite boutiques and board brackets are done. And
yeah,
I'm like, bro, it's April 5th. Like, like,
yeah.
like,
There's
like
so
it's
much time.
like, there's so much time, but like, it's just easy to get into that mindset. And then you start getting in your own head. Right. And then I think
Yeah,
like, your whole gambling analogy, again, maybe we're not advocating for gambling, but like I think what you're really trying to say is like what I always tell people, which is like you're 3 feet away from gold, right?
yeah,
Like I, it was exactly the same for me back when I had to recruit for banking. Like, didn't get a return offer from my summer because I was interning at Bear Stearns. I had to recruit for full time in like 2007, 2008, which was like, I would say, I'm just comparable to, it was like worse than what the market conditions are now, right? And
yeah,
to not have a return offer in hand during those market conditions, like when I recruited for full time, I got rejected by like the first 20 plus firms that I have full time interviews with. And it's like, to your point, like I think so many people would have just given up like way before they even got to the 20 something
yeah,
rejections. Like after 5 or 7 or 8 or 10 or 15 rejections, you're probably like, okay, like this is not for me, right? Like this is not going to work out. But for better or for worse, like my personality is just, I have no quit. So
yeah,
so I wouldn't let myself quit. I wouldn't stop. And then like literally I was down to my very last 2 interviews that I had left. Like I had no more interviews after that. I was like, I had Deutsche Bank and I had Jeffries, and I had those 2 super days on the same day. So I had like, morning was like Deutsche Bank Super Day, and I walked down the street to the Jeffries office, which is on the same street
yeah,
in San Francisco, and I had the Jeffries Super Day all afternoon. So I interviewed for like 10 hours straight that day or something. It was like freaking crazy. And then those are the 2 offers that I got. It's like down to the last 2 chances out of like 20 plus firms back against the wall, and then like you said, it's like the offer you get is like the one right before you quit, right?
yeah,
Except I didn't quit. So like, and then the rest is history. And then I went on to start Wall Street Mastermind. And now I help other people get into banking. Like, look at that.
yeah, yeah. I know. Thank God you went back that last day.
Yeah. So I mean, anyway, I think like that there's so much truth to what you said. And I think it's really, really great advice. And so, hopefully everyone that's listening or watching to this is taking it to heart. And I think the networking advice too is on point too. It's just like, fundamentally, what is networking? It's like, how do you get the other person to like you as a human being?
Yeah,
It's as simple as that. Like people I mean, okay, I'm oversimplifying, right? Like, there's a lot that goes into that. But like sometimes people just like try all this weird stuff and like you said, like be super hardo about it. And it's just like,
yeah,
dude, like are you acting like the type of person that you would want to hang out with? Like, if you're not,
Exactly.
then like it's probably not a good idea, right? So I think those are really great advice. But anyway, guys, for those of you that are still with us, hopefully you got a lot out of this. I think this is a super, awesome and insightful interview. And I had a lot of fun doing it. But like, if you're in a similar situation, maybe you're non-target, maybe you don't have a lot of people around you, you don't really have a support system, you don't even know if it's possible for you to do what you're trying to do because there's no precedent. And maybe you're like doubting it a little bit. Like, just I want to encourage you guys to reach out to us and see, like, just talk to us, tell us your situation, tell us what your goals are, tell us what you feel like you need help with and what you're currently struggling with. And like, based on whatever you tell us, like, we'll do our best to, at a minimum, just give you some advice on what we think you could do. But also, if you want to, and you want the type of help that, Trenton and I have been discussing this whole time, then we can also, like, map out like what a customized game plan will look like for you. And if it's a good fit, like, we can work with you and, help you get an amazing result, just like Trenton did. Like, I mean, being the first person in at least the last 4 years to get into, a top 20 bank out of school, like, that's amazing. Right? So like,
Yeah.
there's no reason why you can't do something similar, right? So if that's something that you guys are interested in, you can go to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street is abbreviated to ST, so it's stmastermind.com/apply. And then answer a couple of basic questions about yourself, and then pick a time that works for you. Then we'll hop on, we'll talk to you, and we'll do our best to help you. All right. So with that said, Trenton, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to just share your journey with us. I think it's, again, super inspiring for people, and also just, it's always fun talking to our clients about their journey and how they got to where they are, and hearing their wins, and to be able to just kind of share in the joy of kind of like the fruits of your labor. And so thank you, and huge congrats again. And I'm excited to see what you accomplish, both at B of A as well as everything else beyond that. So I know you have a very successful career ahead of you, and look forward to seeing what happens.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. And yeah, if anybody out there is in the same boat as me, listen to Sam. He knows what he's doing. I promise you it'll work out.
Thanks, man. All right, guys, we're gonna wrap it up here. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll be back with more of these for you guys in the near future. All right.